With Deltarune Chapter 3 and 4 being so close to release as right now, I want to spread some of my ideas about what I think could happen in Chapter 3 and 4. This is more of a discussion than a theory, so I'm not expecting any of these things to happen, but more so things I would like to see and how I would implement them myself. Okay, so starting off with Chapter 3, I want to go over my idea for what the main story might be. Chapter 3 will likely have a similar structure to Chapter 1 and 2, because we see in Chapter 1, we get introduced to Rousey and then Lancer, and in Chapter 2, we get introduced to Noelle and then Queen. I think Chapter 3 will start with Chris and Susie going to look for Toriel, and when we find her, she'll get kidnapped by Tenna, who I think will be the main villain of the chapter. I also think we will have to go through a bunch of challenges to try and find Toriel, in the same way we go through challenges in Chapter 1 that are set by Lancer and Queen. And then, in Chapter 2, we meet Barley, who reveals he has joined forces for Queen. It's likely that Tenna will convince Undyne to join forces for them. We know that Undyne is quite bored of how peaceful hometown is, and would likely want some challenge and adventure. We'll then probably have a fight against Undyne with Susie and Rousey on our team. Shortly after this, Susie and Rousey leave the team in Chapter 2, similar to Chapter 1 when Susie leaves the team. So it's likely, this time, Rousey will be the one leaving the team, for whatever reason. I think we'll then be joined by Toriel, and then we'll catch up to Undyne, and we'll start a fight with them. After sparing them, we'll continue further, meeting Tenna, who will take Toriel back for whatever goal they have. I also think by this point, we'll have meeting up with Rousey, giving us some interactions between Toriel and Rousey. Also, I think Tenna's goal will probably just be trying to make an educational TV show, as Toriel's a teacher, and Tenna seems to be very, TV themed, from what we've seen. We'll then probably have to go to Tenna's headquarters, which will be similar to the mansion or castle, ending with a fight against Tenna. I think then we'll seal the fountain, waking up in the lounge, and I think Toriel will take some of the stuff that turns into darkness, and take it to the school and back into the dark world. And I think the chapter will end just in time for the festival. Now then, onto my ideas for what I think the boss will be like. I think Tenna is likely to be the main boss of Chapter 3, purely based on the fact that we know the TV is most likely going to be the villain, based on the end of Chapter 2, and Tenna has been brought up multiple times by Toby Fox. I also think Tenna's actually going to be evil, as we can't take the TV back to the main Dark World with us. I also think Tenna's goal will be different than the other bosses, because the first two bosses had the goal of, we want to follow the Knight's will and the Knight's commands, but I think Tenna will have the goal to capture the Knight. I believe this to be the case, because we are told that a Dark World is formed around the wants and will of its creator. And I don't actually think Chris is the Knight, and instead, I think Chris is likely trying to make a dark fountain to lure the actual Knight. But I think this would be explained to us in Chapter 4. So I think in Chapter 3, we'll be left in the dark from what's going on. And so I think Tenna will think we are the Knight, because of the way we look and the fact we made the Dark World, and try to capture us as a result. Also, I think we're going to get a two boss battles with them. One which is just a normal battle against them, like in Chapter 2, and one that's more of a minigame centered battle against them. And for the minigame, I think it'll probably be some kind of rhythm game. It could be any minigame, but I think a rhythm one fits best in the world we've seen so far for Chapter 3. Okay. I also think we're going to see a new gimmick in this chapter. In the same way that we got the R action and S action in Chapter 2, I think we're going to get a new one in Chapter 3. And I think it has something to do with the shootout action line from Toby Fox. So I think because of the fact in Chapter 2 we get to use the Yellow Soul when fighting Spamton, and in Chapter 1 we use the Red Soul against Jebel. So I think it would be cool if in Chapter 3, in the base game, we unlock the ability to switch between red and yellow using TP. It would more likely be a thing of you can be yellow for like a couple turns for like 50 TP. This would then lead to a pattern where each chapter a secret boss would introduce a new soul color, and then in the next chapter we get to use the soul color in any battle. I also think beating Spamton will give us extra abilities in Chapter 3. Stuff like, if you beat Spamton, you get the soft guard and the faster shoot time Susie gives you. And also, we could probably even get the big shot move if we beat Spamton. This would then reward us for beating the secret bosses of a chapter, while not making it mandatory to complete the game. As for the soul and the connections between the soul and Chris, I think we're going to get a lot more in this following chapter. In this chapter, we see a bigger disconnect between the soul, or the player, and Chris. Chapter 1, we only see it at the end where Chris rips out their soul. And in Chapter 2, we have it a couple times with Chris ripping out their soul twice, and also the weird route and after Spamton's fight, both showing Chris to be very uncomfortable with the player's control. So I think it makes sense in Chapter 3 for there to be even bigger disconnects. My idea on how this could happen is during an encounter with Tenna, Tenna might not hit us really hard and knock the soul out of us. This would then cause the soul to go flying and land maybe in a trash area like we see in Chapter 2, which has a dummy in it. This will cause the soul to possess a dummy, which parallels Undertale, where we see multiple times souls getting possessed by ghosts, and will also connect Chris being possessed by the soul, and confirming it basically. And at this point, we then get a section of the game where we have to make it back to Susie and Chris while controlling this dummy. Then, when we make it back to Susie, they will have found Toriel, who will be taking care of Chris's body. At which point, Toriel and Susie will mistake the dummy for an enemy, and we'll get a fight in the same way we fight Susie and Lancer in Chapter 1. I then think at the end of the fight, we'll get a choice between two things to say. One of the things will be something that we usually would say during the game, like something the player would usually say, and one there being something that Chris, before being possessed, would usually say. And I think depending on which one we pick, it won't matter, but it would just change who recognizes us, which would then draw a bigger connection to the fact Chris is acting different, and also draw a connection between the fact that our choices don't really matter. As for the secret boss in this chapter, I honestly think the best theories we have for this are the Woody theory and the Green Soul theory. The Woody theory is the idea that the secret boss will be a cowboy who was the star of a TV show that ended up being cancelled. This will then connect it back to Jebel and Spamton, the idea of the secret boss being discarded in some way. And also, I think the Green Soul theory is great. This connects to the fact that Undyne is going to be in this chapter, and also, or likely will be in this chapter, and the fact that Undyne turns the soul green in Undertale, and also in Chapter 2, Spamton takes on Metamon Neo's form, and that's when we use the Yellow Soul. So there's obviously a connection between who uses it in Undertale and who uses it in Deltarune. Also, there's another theory about the Green Soul, that says that in each secret boss, we're going to get each soul type in the reverse order that they fell into the underground. This being Frisk is the most recent, then the Clover or the yellow soul, then the green soul, then the purple soul, and so on. Which would mean in this chapter, we would likely see the green soul being used. Also, there's a line from Sean, which says, if we can't have this item, that if we don't have this item on us, this fight will be most likely impossible. And the item most likely will be some kind of shield, as the green soul's main ability is making you not be able to move. And while it does make sense for the cowboy to have a yellow soul, I think rather than us shooting the cowboy will be shooting us and we'll have to block the bullets. I also think the reason for the cowboy accepting the offer from the mystery man or going insane will actually be different from Jevil and Spamton. With both of them wanting more power and accepting the offer for more information, I think the cowboy is most likely going to be already successful, as we know they had a TV show at one point. So I think they will reject the offer from the mystery man, at which point the mystery man will become angry at them and try to ruin their life, most likely by cancelling their show and removing their fame, leaving them with nothing, which would then mean the mystery man could force them to accept the offer for more information. The goal behind the mystery man wanting this is unknown, but in my mind, I think he is experimenting with how much information he can give someone before they go insane. But I'm unsure if that's true, and that's more speculation. I want to talk on the weird route. I personally don't actually think there will be a weird route in this chapter, but there could be just as equally. So if there is, here's how I think it'll go. Honestly, I think it would just be a parallel to chapter 2, because chapter 2 was quite like a big parallel to chapter 1 in most parts. So this would lead us to getting Toriel to kill Undyne, leaving the festival with no guards, which would then allow us to actually continue the weird route in chapter 4. And I do think there will be a weird route in chapter 4 because of the big connections between Noelle and the weird route. Also, the only issue with this is I don't really see us manipulating Toriel in the same way we do with Noelle, because Noelle feels very specific to that idea. So again, I honestly don't think we will have weird routes. I think we'll have to wait until chapter 4 and Noelle's return. But at the same time, if it is there, we'll most likely just have to kill Undyne. Okay, so on to chapter 4. Here are my main thoughts on the story. And my main thoughts right now are that chapter 4 will take place in the light world and dark world quite a lot. I think the game will take place between two areas, the festival in the light world and the chapter's dark world. The chapter will take place doing stuff in the festival with someone of your choice. You can pick between Barley, Noelle and Susie, and then going back into dark world. I think the dark world will be split into 3 segments and light world 4 or maybe 5. And the dark world will work as a few connected mini adventures. During the first light world section, you'll end up in a room of your own, and Chris will rip out their soul, run off and come back, and after they come back, you and Susie will find the dark world has been made. And once you go inside and seal the fountain, you'll go out and start doing the second section of light world. But then the same thing will happen, and this time you, Susie and Noelle will go in and finding Rousey being captured. And you won't find Rousey before you seal the fountain. And the third time this happens, it'll be revealed Susie was in the room the fountain was made, causing her to be trapped. So you, Noelle and Barley will go to save her and Rousey. And in the end of the game, I think we will have a sequence mimicking chapter 1, but this time we will escape the cage by using the yellow soul, and we'll chase Chris down by possessing something, and Chris will reveal what's going on. As for the dark world segments, I think the boss of the world will know we're not the knight, but will try and stop us from fighting the knight, as this boss will be working more as a bodyguard. Because each time we leave the main dark world, we take items from inside. Each other dark world will continue from where the last one ended, making one single dark world by the end. This would then mean we can still go back to past areas in order to find the pieces and not the secret bosses, like what we see in chapter 1 and 2. We could also see multiple eggs in the chapter because of the multiple dark worlds, but that's more like that probably won't happen. The dark worlds themselves are probably going to also be festival themed, and we see a small group of presents in one of Teresa posts, which could be one of the sources of the dark world. I think we could see a new gimmick in this chapter, where it's going to be the same thing as last time, where we now get the green cell as well, but this one's going to give us TP for using, because it's going to be harder to dodge things when we have to use shield. Other than that, I think the main gimmick of this chapter will be the multiple dark worlds, local light world segments, and also the fact that our parties will change a lot in this chapter. Other than that, it's kind of hard to say what we could see, because we don't have much on this chapter as of right now. As for the light world, I think in the first section, we'll get to choose who we go to the festival with, and we have 3 choices, and depending on who we don't pick, those two will end up going together. We could either go with Bardley, and Noelle and Susie end up together. I think this is going to be the most popular one, to be fair. Then Chris and Susie, which will leave Noelle and Bardley. This one feels more like a couple of friends going together. And then Chris and Noelle and Susie and Bardley is most likely going to be the weird route option. But I also think all options will have like a lot of fun stuff to them. And you'll probably play some mini games with whoever you choose to go with. In the second section, I think we'll see the rain that we've seen in gifts appear, and this is when we head to the church or go see Onion San. This one's probably going to be more character heavy than the first, with we are seeing a lot of people interacting with each other. And I think the third or final segment will be a little bit more relaxed with us going on the Ferris wheel, and also we could even see Noelle's house at this point. And at this point, it'll probably be the even. As for the secret bosses, we don't have anything to go off of, so I'll just try my best to like make a prediction. I think we will use the Power Soul because of the reverse soul theory I mentioned before, and also the themes of the bosses being abandoned could mean this would be like an amalgamation of unwanted gifts. But other than that, it's kind of impossible to guess, unless Louise the secret boss, which wouldn't make much sense. But you know, it's Super Boss. As for this chapter's weird route, I think it's likely we'll get another weird route because of the fact Noelle's going to be joining us, presumably. And I think if we're on a weird route save, Bardley won't appear to like be a choice. And I think, as I mentioned before, you have to pick Noelle to go with. I also think Susie will notice how you're treating her during the Dark Horse segments, and causing her to fight you two. I don't think she'll die, but I think both Dark Hordes will end with Noelle and Susie leaving together. But I think the context will be very different, where one it's just them having fun, and one it's Susie trying to protect Noelle. As for the ending, I've already mentioned a bit of my idea, but I'm going to go into more depth about it. I think when we leave Chris and end up landing in the graveyard, and I think Sans will be there, set at Adventure Sleep, and in a no weird route run, I think we'll end up assessing or controlling Sans, at which point we have to chase after Chris to the hospital. I think Chris will take you behind the main counter of the hospital, and we'll see a tall dark figure walk in and create a dark fountain. At this point, we will exit Sans, who will now be asleep, and Chris will explain what's going on, revealing they're not the knight, and that every time they left us, was just trying to stop the knight from making a dark fountain. And in chapter 3, they only made Dark Mountain as a law for the night. They will then reveal that they knew they needed us or the soul to seal the fountain. But they know for a fact that if the soul's in them, that another dark fountain will be made. I think this will be a meta commentary on the fact that if the pair keeps playing, more dark worlds will be formed. So Chris is trying to stop dark worlds being formed by not letting us be involved. I think we'll then make a deal with Chris and return to them as darkness from the dark fountain fills screen, like in chapter 2. This will be very interesting because it means the pair and Chris on the same page for the first time. But I think the Weird Group will have some differences. Number one, I think Sans won't be there, and instead will possess like one of the graves, and the dust will reform into one of the monsters, most likely Snowy Smoller. Sans will then follow us to the hospital, as I think he'll take on more with like a judging role, like he does in Undertale. And when we get into the hospital, Chris will knock out Sans, and will drag us both behind a counter. I think when we leave the body, or turn to dust, and this time we won't contribute with Chris, and instead we'll just possess Chris by force. So I think that's gonna be the ending. But other than that, those are my like ideas for chapter 3 and 4 could hold. Most of this won't happen, and while some of it could be similar, I'm sure Toby Fox has better ideas than me. So, but these were just things I would have added if I was making the game. Anyway, if you want some more theory type stuff, I have an Untold theory out, and other than that, I'll catch you next time.